The store's posters changed images whenever I looked away. At first, it was subtle. A smile that lingered too long. A shadow creeping across a product I had just passed. I thought my eyes were tired, that the late hour had dulled my perception. But when I returned my gaze, the posters were different. The cheerful cartoon on the snack aisle now had hollow eyes, staring straight at me, and the convenience store's usual promotions had warped into strange, almost poetic lines. You always leave things behind. Why not here? The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, low and uneven, casting a jaundiced glow that seemed to slide across the shelves rather than illuminate them. The air smelled of bleach, stale coffee, and something faintly metallic, like iron under water. Each inhale felt thick, almost viscous, pressing against the back of my throat. I moved forward on the cracked linoleum, heels clicking, each step echoing louder than it should, like the store itself was amplifying my presence. I paused at the end of the candy aisle. A poster advertising a local festival had twisted. Children's faces smiled impossibly wide, and one figure, a boy I recognized from a photograph buried in my drawer at home, was there waving at me. My stomach knotted. I blinked, shook my head, convinced myself I had misremembered. But the next poster over, for a new brand of soda, now read, "You spilled it. You always spill it." I didn't remember spilling soda, but the words felt intimate, accusing, as if the store knew things I had not told anyone. The aisles stretched longer than I remembered. I had walked this store countless times in my life, a place of mundane errands and half-hearted late-night cravings. But tonight, the layout felt wrong. The snack aisle extended like a corridor into darkness, the refrigeration units humming in low, irregular tones. I glanced at my reflection in the glass of the freezers. My face looked tired, older, taut around the eyes. For a second, I thought I saw another me, just behind me, watching, but when I turned, nothing was there. I tried to leave. The sliding glass doors at the front seemed farther away than they had when I entered, and the door handle felt heavier, as if weighed by an unseen hand. I brushed a hand over the shelves for orientation, but the tactile familiarity of the bottles and wrappers seemed to shift beneath my touch. A bag of chips, smooth and crinkled in my grip, whispered when I squeezed it, "Not yet. You promised." A cold draft traced my spine. The store was otherwise still, the hum of the lights the only sound. I walked past the magazine rack. Faces stared back at me. Celebrities I didn't recognize at first, then slowly morphing into acquaintances, old teachers, friends I had forgotten. The headlines bent toward me, words shifting. "You lied. You looked away. You forgot us." I froze by the counter. The clerk's stool was empty. Yet, in the reflection of the glass display, I could see someone seated there. My reflection or something like it, with eyes too sharp, too knowing. I blinked. The poster behind the counter now bore my face, blurred and melting. A familiar expression twisted into discomfort. Below it, in small letters I hadn't seen before, "You belong here, always." The walls felt closer. The ceiling seemed lower. I turned a corner, and the aisle I knew well had become a spiral, shelves curling inward, products stacked impossibly high. The posters along the way now replayed memories I hadn't spoken aloud. The time I abandoned a friend at a park, the lie I told my parents about grades, the careless betrayal in college that still prickled in my chest. Each image whispered, muttered, or shouted fragments of my life. I wanted to scream, but the sound was swallowed before it left my throat. A candy display shimmered unnaturally. The wrappers rustled without wind. My own childhood photographs appeared among the snacks, mixed with generic product advertisements. Faces I had loved, feared, or lost were stitched into the glossy surfaces, their eyes all converging on me. I realized, with a tightening chest, that I had never entered this store alone. Not truly. Every visit had been observed, cataloged. Every choice I had made here and elsewhere noted. The posters weren't just changing. They were reading me, learning me, shaping themselves from me. I stumbled toward the back of the store. The bathroom door loomed, ajar, light spilling out like a thin vein of promise. I thought if I could just step inside, maybe I could find normalcy. But the poster above it displayed a scene from my childhood bedroom, my father's voice echoing from nowhere, murmuring reprimands I had long forgotten. The message was clear. I was not entering. I was being consumed. The store seemed alive, not haunted but sentient. Its hum was a pulse, its lights a gaze, the posters the most intimate form of speech. I felt the walls breathe around me, the floor shift beneath me. Each aisle I passed whispered, "You see us. You cannot leave." I tried to speak, to reason, to apologize, to deny. My voice fractured against the hum, swallowed by the air that smelled now of iron and wet paper. Posters I had once ignored now formed sentences across multiple images. You were afraid. Afraid to remember. Afraid to see. Afraid to be. Each word pressed on me with physical weight, a subtle, suffocating insistence. A low light flickered overhead. I could see the store in fragments. The front doors, the cash register, the frozen aisle, all superimposed over each other in impossible angles. I realized the store was infinite, a labyrinth formed from memory, guilt, and fear. And at its center, I was already entangled. I sank to the floor, hands pressed to my ears, eyes darting to every shifting poster, trying to will them away. But the store was patient. It did not rush. It merely observed, and in observing, shaped me. The posters, once advertisements for snacks and soda, had become mirrors reflecting every secret, every fleeting thought, every shame. They were the language of the store, and the language was mine. Minutes or hours I could not tell passed. I ceased resisting. I stopped blinking. I stared at the ceiling, at a poster of a sunset I had once painted in school. Its colors deepened, thickened, and the sun split into multiple spheres, orbiting a central point. Then I understood. The store did not merely trap. It invited. It did not merely reflect. It conversed. It did not merely watch. It wove itself into the fabric of those who entered. The exit doors shimmered, impossibly distant, then impossibly close. I reached for them, but my hand met only air. A new poster unfolded before me, a panorama of my life as if stretched over the expanse of a wall that had never existed. And in the center, a space for me, perfectly formed, smiling in a way I had never smiled for anyone. The store's whisper became a single thought, clear and intimate. You are ours, and we are yours. I realized, with a mixture of awe and terror, that leaving was never the point. The store was not a place. It was a state of being. Every visit, every glance, every perceived mundane action had always been a dialogue, a slow weaving of self into space. I was not trapped. I was integrated. I was recognized. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, the store was empty, silent, still. The posters displayed generic products once more, smiling children, sunny advertisements. But in the back of my mind, I knew the truth. The store remembered me, and I remembered it. And in that shared recollection, we existed two halves of a single, quiet, sentient eternity. Outside, the night was ordinary. The neon sign flickered, welcoming passers-by. No one entered. No one left. But the door was open, inviting, patient, and the posters waited. A customer walked in wearing a coat made of receipts from our store. The bell above the door chimed, tinny and hollow, and for a moment I thought it was the usual night, lonely, fluorescent, and humming with the low buzz of refrigeration. But then I saw the coat. It shimmered faintly under the harsh white lights, a patchwork of tiny paper slips layered in impossible patterns, edges curling and overlapping like the wings of paper insects. The moment he stepped past the threshold, the air thickened, the warmth of stale coffee and cleaning chemicals settling into something heavier, almost suffocating. I watched him move toward the aisles. His gait was deliberate, silent except for the soft rustle of paper. But there was no wind. None of the ceiling fans were moving. The sliding doors had long since locked into a dull, inaudible hum, and yet the coat whispered. Tiny fragments of sound drifted from it. Diet Cola, 2 for 1. Paper towels, birthday candles. The receipts fluttered with an almost animate intelligence, brushing against each other, murmuring secrets that belonged to the store and, impossibly, to me. I wiped a hand across my forehead, feeling the sweat cool too quickly against my skin. The lights flickered, once, twice, then settled back into their oppressive white glow. The man didn't speak. His face was hidden under a hood made from crumpled coupons, the shadows curling into a vague familiarity. He stopped in the aisle where I kept the instant noodles and energy drinks. I tried to tell myself he was a regular, some late-night shopper with a strange fashion sense, but the store had been quiet for weeks. Empty. I noticed then that the receipts weren't normal. They weren't just lists of products. They carried memories, my memories. One slip unfolded in his hand like a tiny scroll, showing a purchase from 3 years ago. A birthday card I'd bought for my mother. A small pack of candles I never lit because I forgot her. Another revealed the single pack of gum I bought after my first failed exam, the one I dropped in the trash without even opening. The paper crinkled and whispered my shame, my negligence, my regrets. The air grew colder. I could see my breath in the fluorescent glare, misting like smoke from a candle that didn't exist. The man moved closer, and the receipts shifted as though they were breathing, layers peeling back and reforming, rustling against each other in a rhythm that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. A small slip quivered in his palm, the ink faint but legible. You forgot to call him again. The name was mine, or it belonged to someone I had tried to erase from memory. I stepped back, bumping into the end cap of chips, the plastic rattling like bones. Who are you? I asked, my voice rough, swallowed by the humming of the freezers. The coat rustled. A whisper rose through the paper. I am what you left behind. I blinked, and a new receipt appeared across the front of his coat, wet with ink that smelled like old coffee and paper burn. It showed a fragment of my own reflection from this very store, weeks ago, when I had stood in the frozen foods aisle too tired to move, staring at a box of frozen dumplings. I remembered that night with a clarity that made my chest tighten. The quiet desperation of existing unnoticed, unremarked. The man tilted his head, and the whispering grew louder. I could hear the receipts discussing my life, not as a narrative, but as if each small, mundane purchase were a confession. Milk, missed anniversary, lottery ticket, apartment rent, half-used notebook, forgotten friend. They spoke in fragments that hurt, slicing through the mundane rhythm of the store. I realized then that every slip of paper I had ever touched here had been preserved, cataloged, and returned to me through him. The coat was more than a coat. It was a map of my life, stitched together with the minutiae I had thought inconsequential. Each purchase, each impulse, each negligence had been recorded. And now it was staring back at me. I tried to run, to reach the exit, but the floor seemed to lengthen, the aisles stretching farther than they should. The fluorescent light flickered, stuttering with impatience. I stumbled into the snack aisle, and receipts fluttered toward me, brushing against my skin like feathers dipped in frost. One pressed against my chest. A credit for a candy bar I'd bought for a child I had never had. Another. A bottle of cough syrup I purchased during a night I had almost given up entirely. They knew. Every purchase, every moment, every hesitation. I reached the counter and tried to call for help, but my mouth went dry. My reflection in the plexiglass showed only him, the coat consuming every corner of my vision. He raised a hand, and the receipts rose like a wave, enveloping him in a flickering glow. The whispers became a cacophony, voices of 1,000 forgotten moments, laughing and crying and accusing. Then, a silence, the kind of silence that falls after a storm, thick and tangible. I could feel the weight of the store pressing in from all sides. The man moved closer, and the hood fell back just enough for me to glimpse his face. It was me, or it had been, at some point, a version of me that had never let go, that had remembered everything I had tried to forget. The coat, the whispers, the rustling receipts. All of it was me, returned to confront the choices I had abandoned. I sank to the floor, the tiles cold and hard against my palms. I wanted to scream, to apologize, to run. But the store itself seemed to pulse, and the fluorescent lights dimmed and flickered with each breath I took. The receipts brushed my hands, tracing the lines of my fingers, curling into the impressions of my past. "You've been keeping me out," the voice whispered, soft now, intimate, almost tender. "Every time you forget, every time you leave, every time you deny." I understood then that I had not wandered into this store. It had been waiting for me. The receipts, the purchases, the tiny fragments of life I had ignored, they had been accumulating here, in this space that existed slightly outside reality, waiting to coalesce into something tangible, sentient. And now it had. The man, no, the reflection, the embodiment of everything I had neglected, extended a hand. I felt an irresistible pull, as if the coat were weaving itself into me. One by one, the receipts lifted, floating around me, whispering memories I had buried deep in the corners of my mind. The smell of paper and ink filled my lungs, intoxicating and suffocating at once. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the store looked normal again, or as normal as it had ever seemed. The bell above the door chimed as though nothing had happened. I blinked, and the aisles were empty. The fluorescent lights hummed the same monotonous tune. Yet, in the corner of my vision, a faint rustling persisted. On the counter lay a single receipt, curled at the edges. I picked it up. The ink was faded but legible. "Welcome back." And beneath it, in a smaller, tighter script, written as if by someone who knew my every thought, "You've always belonged here." I shivered. The realization sank in. The store wasn't just a convenience store. It was a ledger of existence, a repository of all the choices I had avoided, all the moments I had abandoned. And the coat, my other self, was not gone. It had merely folded itself into the walls, the aisles, the air, waiting for the next time I needed to be reminded that forgetting is impossible and the past is never truly past. I set the receipt down. The store's lights flickered once more, and I felt the faintest brush of paper against my sleeve. And I knew, finally, that the convenience store was not a place I visited. It was a place that visited me.